pull up a chair, grab a cocktail, grab a drink, whatever you need to do. It's time to get comfy in the Lettermen Lounge with Matt Parker and Spencer Holbrook. We're talking Ohio State football recruiting. As always, Matt, like I said, it's a great time to be in the Lettermen Lounge. The message board is popping off. I will say that. That's also called the Lettermen Lounge. If you didn't know where we got the name, you can go to lettermenrow.com and get access to that Lettermen Row message board in the Lettermen Lounge right now. I would suggest you do so before the season starts. The coverage is flowing at lettermenrow.com, the recruiting coverage. You're introducing people to new, I think you had a 2026 defensive end write-up last week. Like, you're introducing folks to new recruits. We're getting intel on 5-star recruits. We're getting intel on various other people. And we're previewing the decision of 4-star wide receiver Jeremiah McClellan. Is Brian Hartline up to some diabolical things again? Or is McClellan going to be the rare miss on the recruiting trail for Hartline? Matt, it's interesting. This recruitment has seen a couple twists and turns that maybe we didn't really expect early in this recruitment. But what's the latest here?
I think it's really important to go to the moment where there was the shift for Ohio State, like in favor of the Buckeyes. And that was during spring ball. McClellan visited Ohio State around the end of March. I think that March 25th weekend, when Ohio State had what felt like 900 visitors on campus for unofficial visits. And it was the same weekend. Well, I don't think it's that many, but it was the same weekend where the Armstrong twins, who are now committed, were there. Peyton Pierce was there for his first visit, now committed to the class. And I do believe Jeremiah McClellan was also there that weekend. He spent a lot of time around Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, Julian Fleming. I mean, the entire room on an unofficial visit. And really, those relationships with the current wide receiver room really started to develop there. And then, of course, the relationship with Brian Hartline. So that's in March of this year. And then we go to official visit season. As a vast majority of the Ohio State class, the June 9th through 11th weekend, majority of the offensive class was there, including Jeremiah Smith, 5-star wide receiver, which, again, is a significant relationship. Both of those guys, both of the Jeremiahs, were in LA for the OT7 finals and the Elite 11 and stuff like that. And they did have a few moments of just chopping it up with one another and things like that. You see that relationship with Ohio State, specifically with Brian Hartline and with Ryan Day for Jeremiah McClellan, really just deepen. This is absolutely not 100%, but like as much of a quote unquote traditional recruitment as you could get. This kid's about ball. He's about fit. He's about, the next 3 to 4 years and how can I get to the NFL? And so you look at that kind of opportunity and you would think, well, okay, you're a wide receiver that is interested in Ohio State and Ohio State is interested in you. And if those are your things, it's a no-brainer to go to Columbus, right? Would you agree?
Yes. And I have a theory I want to run by you on Jeremiah McClellan recruitment, but I would love for you to finish your thought.
Yes. And as a powerful figure in the college football landscape would say, not so fast, my friend. There are a few things that are giving the in-state program, Missouri Tigers, some interest, and then the faraway program of Oregon for McClellan. However, Oregon has kind of trailed off as we get closer and closer to that August 13th commitment date. He was rumored to go to Eugene during the contact period in July. Ultimately, he never made the trip to Eugene, which was significant for Ohio State and for Missouri. I'm not going to count out the Tigers here in this by talking about this recruitment because that's ignorant, and we are not ignorant here.
Well,
we are not ignorant about recruiting. Let's specify there real quick. But as it relates to not going to Eugene, that was a significant moment. Again, very similar to that shift in March for Ohio State. And you just kind of see these things start to build up and up and up. And, you can take stock into, all of the recent social media posts where, he keeps retweeting things about, staying home and going home and everything to Missouri. But I put in a pick into the recruiting prediction machine for Ohio State to land him in March. And I'm going to stick by that even through his decision. And if he decides to go to Missouri, because signing day isn't until December, and I think Ohio State, if he decides in August to verbally commit to Missouri, I think there's a way Ohio State will get him to sign in December.
I would agree in sticking with the prediction. I have a prediction for Jeremiah McClellan about Ohio State as well. I kind of jumped on the bandwagon there in June after you did it in March. So, Matt, good job. You beat me to it. I got beat. I don't know what else to say. But I will say this. This is why I think Jeremiah McClellan is going to go to Ohio State. Do you remember the 2022 recruiting class? 2 wide receivers, both not on the roster anymore, both named Caleb. One with a C, one with a K. In 2023, the recruiting class, Brian Hartline added again with his name decisions. He gets 2 wide receivers, both last name Rogers. One with no D, one R-O-D-G-E-R-S, one R-O-G-E-R-S. You know where I'm going with this. Brian Hartline loves double names in his recruiting classes. He's already got a Jeremiah. Might as well have another. That is my very informed intel on the Jeremiah McClellan recruitment. No, I'm just kidding, Matt. I promise it's just a joke.
I was going to say, I think this is why I beat you to the punch on the prediction, but
that's just me having some fun because I've had a little bit too much coffee today, but that's neither here nor there nor anywhere. I do think that Ohio State's going to win out in this. Christian Brothers College is a high school that has been very kind to the Buckeyes. You look at Cameron Babb. You look at Cameron Brown. Another double name, Cameron and Cameron. And now you look at Jeremiah.
That's where I thought you were going with that.
You look at Jeremiah McClellan. I just think that connection that Ohio State has built over the long haul, you think dating all the way back to the 2017 recruiting class, the 2018 recruiting class, those are deep connections that are far more than just Jeremiah McClellan. And you brought that up specifically with him and the Ohio State staff and his development of a relationship with Brian Hartline, with Ryan Day. Brian Hartline and Ryan Day are no strangers to that specific school. And I kind of almost feel bad for Missouri in this because I think Missouri has a decent chance to land him if he's at any other high school in the state of Missouri. But I think that the decision is going to come down to those relationships that Brian Hartline and Ryan Day have made with Jeremiah McClellan, with Christian Brothers High School. I just that's where my head is right now, and I think that's why Ohio State wins out.
And also, I think it's important to note that anytime someone is recruiting against Ohio State for a wide receiver, it's automatically going to be like a wide receiver that is not the Jeremiah Smiths and Mylan Grahams of the world, not the 5-star, this and that wide receiver. Which I'm here to say that Jeremiah McClellan is this and that. By the way, he is explosive off the line of scrimmage. It's very impressive. He's about 5'11", 190, probably closer to 195, quite honestly. And how physical he is off the line of scrimmage when he gets out of his stance and starts getting into his route. It's violent. He has a violent first step as a wide receiver, and it's pretty damn cool, quite honestly. I have not seen something so explosive from a high school wide receiver in that way. To my point, though, anytime a program is recruiting against Ohio State for a receiver that might be lower ranked and things like that, it's automatically going to be negative recruiting against Ohio State. It's going to be, it's going to be hard for you to crack that wide receiver room, look at the guys in front of you, blah, 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 which Ohio State just turns around and says, well, why would you want to play for someone that thinks you can't play anywhere? And that's exactly that's pretty close to the situation that this is for Ohio State here. Ultimately, they are recruiting him for the slot position because they already have Jeremiah Smith, who's 6'4", 200 pounds. Someone that size, I guess, could play in the slot, but that's not going to happen, at least in year one and probably in year two. Then you have a guy like Mylan Graham, who is like the high school version of Emeka Ibuka, quite honestly. With his size, he's like 6'1", 6'2", a pretty slim 190, somewhere in that frame. Ohio State moves Ibuka around the field, but not a true slot kind of guy. Whereas someone like Jeremiah McClellan at 5'11", 190, 195, that's like perfect for what Ohio State wants. It's very similar to Jackson Smith and Jigba size, although McClellan's a little bit heavier, like a little bit bulkier, and that's where Ohio State sees him. And then you look at guys that can play the slot and looking ahead into 2024, and the first name for me that jumps out is Brandon Inniss, right? Like that's when you go to 2024, it's going to be second-year wide receiver Brandon Inniss. And then the question marks after that, I mean, Bryson Rodgers is an option for the slot in 2024, albeit he's a little bit of a taller option for the slot, but like he can still do it. And then you have a guy like, should he decide to commit and go to Ohio State, Jeremiah McClellan, there's opportunity for him at Ohio State if he decides to go to Ohio State. And I just think that opportunity for someone as competitive as him is too much to just be like, I'm going to stay at home and be the guy. I just think with how Ohio State recruits, with the kind of guys that they recruit specifically at wide receiver, it's hard for me, for someone that has the relationship and has that competitiveness, to turn down Ohio State. But I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Lord knows I've been wrong, especially on this specific platform. So, like, if that happens on Sunday at 3:00, then things change, folks. You see that everywhere you watch recruiting things. Things change pretty quickly. So,
the more things change, Matt, the more they stay the same with Brian Hartline. So we'll see where it goes. I don't. That's about all I have to say about that. That is Jeremiah McClellan's decision will have a big impact on what the Buckeyes do in 2024 at receiver. You've got Jeremiah Smith, no questions there. He's pretty good at football, I've heard. You got Mylan Graham. You got Mylan Graham, also pretty good at football. I think we'll actually see him play football in September. Let's go do that, Matt. What do you think? And then, nice. Yeah, and then Jeremiah McClellan, question mark? I think probably, but if they don't, there's a couple other names out there that could possibly, emerge as potential options for Hartline and the Buckeyes. Not that they're going to take backup options; they just don't do that. Ohio State's not going to do that. But there are some names that Ohio State really does truly like. That's not really a backup option. It's just like, okay, this guy picked him. Now this is where we go. I don't really think of that as a backup. I more just think of it as like also interested in these folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one name right now that is kind of the elephant in the room about all of this is Chance Robinson from St. Thomas Aquinas down in Fort Lauderdale. Ohio State offered him at the end of July, which goes to show that that's a new relationship that's building. I asked the source inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. I was like, what do you see in Chance Robinson? And the source pretty just bluntly said, I like him, and we like him, and we think he's good, so we offered him. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of hard to argue against that, right?
Enough.
That was sufficient for me. So you go and you watch the highlights, and that's the thing, they're highlights, not the full game film like Ohio State gets to watch. So you got to be very nitpicky watching the highlights. But it's a slot guy. I mean, he's 6 foot, 190 pounds. There's a vision for that slot position in this 24 class. And if Jeremiah McClellan isn't going to take the opportunity, well, Brian Hartline might head back down to South Florida once again. And it's worth noting that Robinson is committed to Miami right this very moment. So if Sunday doesn't go the Buckeyes' way, there's a pretty solid chance that Ohio State is going to go down to South Florida and try to flip one of its favorite sons and head up back to Columbus. So that'll be something to watch.
Certainly something to watch. I'll have my eye on it, Matt. Now that you mention it, I will have my eye on it. Let's switch gears here, Matt. You've got a couple other things that you'd like to get off your chest, Matt. There's some things pressing down. What do you got for us?
Well, let's see. I think the thing that I want to get to is perhaps the defensive line.
Well, let's do it, Matt. And that's a great
Let's-
way for you to start this segment, right? Like here on August 8th, as we record this, I'll be transparent, full transparency. August 8th, Sam Spiegelman has just dropped a story telling us things about the defensive line. And it lines up with exactly what you're hearing, which lines up with what other people in the Ohio State market, friends of the show, Jeremy Birmingham, Andrew Ellis, have talked about it. We are talking about it. Sam Spiegelman is talking about it. That means that there is steam here. And that is with who, Matt? In an area of where that Ohio State doesn't have a lot of success in.
It's down in the bayou, baby.
Down
We're
to-
talking about we're talking about 5-star defensive lineman Dominic McKinley.
Yeah.
6'5", about 280 pounds or so. Who, he took his official visit to Ohio State the very first weekend of June, that June 2nd through 4th weekend. And I think, when myself and a few others figured out that he was heading to campus for an official visit, everyone was kind of like, what? Who? What? Oh, all right, whatever. That's a toss away visit. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, not so fast, my friend.
Yeah.
Not so fast. Turns out, Larry Johnson and the Buckeyes are making a dent in this recruitment in Louisiana for the defensive linemen. There's been a lot more smoke about LSU and Texas and Oklahoma and all the programs that do go into Louisiana and get guys, but Ohio State is making some real noise here. I do believe McKinley is supposed to make a decision sometime in the next couple of weeks. I haven't had a chance to look at Sam's
September 1.
piece. September 1. Okay, there you go. That's longer than a couple of weeks. That's a few weeks, I think. A couple is 2, and that's not 2 weeks away. So
2 weeks, a trio of weeks.
it's a ways away.
That's
Anyway,
Midwest.
it's a ways away. Yeah, exactly. I think the most important thing about this, yes, there is Ohio State steam. There is some Ohio State smoke. Typically where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think it's significant. There's a story that my good friend Sam wrote a couple weeks ago where the quote from McKinley was, I think I have a good idea of where I'm going, and it might surprise some folks. That's interesting. Don't you think? What say you?
I'd eliminate the hometown Tigers from that. Brian Kelly and his. As I stumble through hitting the mute button, we're doing this show. It's just a wonderful time, guys. Brian Kelly and his family might not be too happy with this decision from things that, obviously, Ohio State smoke 3 weeks out from decision day in an area where the Buckeyes just generally don't recruit well is pretty telling. Like they got Jair Brown, but Jair Brown's also got a lot of Ohio connection. He ended up transferring into Ohio. Like Ohio State doesn't go into Louisiana and get kids. And so the fact that Dominic McKinley, as Sam reported on Tuesday, quickly meshed with Larry Johnson, defensive line coach at Ohio State, Sam even went as far as to say that he's heard people that say that Ohio State is a, quote, dark horse contender. Like, that's not something that people with reputations just put online for the sake of putting online. That's not something we're just going to talk about just to get Ohio State fans all hot and bothered and excited for a decision the day before the Indiana game. Like, this is a real thing, in my opinion. Like, this is something that you're striking while the iron's hot. I think Larry Johnson did a great job on this visit. He's got to continue to do that. We've seen him struggle on the recruiting trail as of late, but all of his sins can be forgiven, I guess, if you want to put it into biblical terms, I suppose. If you go out and land Justin Scott and Dominic McKinley and Edric Houston and maybe tack on a defensive end along the way, like all can be, smoothed over if you're doing this. And the fact that he's even put Ohio State in contention for Dominic McKinley tells me Larry Johnson still got it. And the fact that the Buckeyes are now according to some smart people, the dark horse contender, and he's telling people that his decision is going to surprise some folks. Okay, let saddle up, boys.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. There are some tea leaves to be reading here for sure. But I just think given the nature of how the last going on 3 cycles has been for defensive line specifically, I would say to, pump the brakes. Believe it when you see it. Believe it when it happens. That's kind of the approach that I'm going to take here. And it's as interesting as it is to see the quotes and everything that are coming out of this. I also think it's important to note that with how recruiting is nowadays, this could all be for naught. This could all be to pump up one thing for something else to come to fruition, for something else to work. And that's speculation right there from the jump, and I'm going to own that. That's speculation. But again, it is. I just find it interesting that a kid who doesn't really talk to anyone unless you're there in person, and the same kid who has only been to Ohio State once in his entire life, is given the Buckeyes a public chance. Defensive line is a position that Ohio State sorely needs to get right in this class, in this cycle. And that they have a great foundational piece in Justin Scott, the 5-star defensive tackle from St. Ignatius out in Chicago. And then you have 5-star defensive end, not edge rusher, but like defensive end, Edric Houston, who's making his decision August 22nd. That appears to be a Ohio State-Alabama battle at this current juncture. So there are some things on the trail for Larry Johnson. And the end of August, beginning of September is proving to be a pretty pivotal moment, both for Ohio State on the team side and on the recruiting side.
Matt, I will go ahead and stake my claim here. Ohio State is doing a lot of things with intention in this recruiting cycle. You see it in the way that they're attempting to recruit linebackers. You see it in the way they're trying to beef up that offensive line. You see the type of receivers they're recruiting with intentions. The 3 defensive linemen they're most in on right now. Justin Scott is already committed. He's a 5-star do-it-all defensive lineman, a big, beefy fella. He's the number 2 defensive lineman in the country, according to On3. Then you go number 4 defensive lineman overall in the country, Dominic McKinley. Ohio State is in that battle, 6'4", 280. Then you go down the board to the number 9 defensive lineman in the country, not defensive end, defensive lineman, 6'4", 275 in Edric Houston. Ohio State's tired of getting pushed around in the trenches. Ohio State's tired of getting Michiganed. Okay, that's a verb. Getting pushed by the folks up north. They're finding the big boys, and they want to put them in the middle. And that's not by accident. You had Caden McDonald in the last class. You added Jason Moore, who's massive. Now you're telling me that you're gonna swing on 3 top 10 defensive linemen in the entire country. One of which from way down to Bayou, and this is not by accident. And so I think there's a clear strategy here. And hey, credit them because they've already got Justin Scott in the class. Now go take another swing. Why not? Why wouldn't you take another 5-star swing on a defensive lineman when you've already got one committed? This isn't a KJ Bolden situation where you're putting all of the eggs in one basket. You did that. You got Justin Scott. So now go do it again. You might as well, because if you lose, you still have Justin Scott there. I love this approach from Ohio State. I actually think that this is awesome, that the Buckeyes are doing this and getting in that fight, because that's one that maybe more often than not, Ohio State's just going to say that's a kid from Lafayette, Louisiana that isn't even going to consider Ohio State. We're going to let that be a South battle. And the Buckeyes aren't going to do that anymore.
And it's easy to love it because it works, because it's working.
Yeah.
I think this is a very good moment in time for Ohio State defensive line recruiting, because they're in contention for a guy that they probably wouldn't be in cycles before. Buford is Buford, and we all know that Buford kids are just different. So that is there. But again, the only thing that's missing is like a true edge rusher. Ohio State is still not done with Marquise Lightfoot. the edge rusher out of Kenwood Academy in Chicago, who committed to Miami over the Buckeyes in July. They're not giving up on him. That recruitment is not done, and I expect Ohio State to take that all the way to signing day. I mean, they are going to try to flip him as hard as it's done for any prospect it has ever tried to flip. That's a player that Ohio State needs in this class. And if you can get, it's a whole heck of a lot easier to flip a guy if you can land at least one of the two of Houston and McKinley. If you can land one of those two, you got 2 5-stars already. You got a high 4-star guy with the pitch of, hey, look, these guys are here. What's holding you back? You know? And when he's committed to a program, Miami, say whatever you want about what's holding him back. That's his business. But you go from there, you know? And like I fully expect to see Marquise Lightfoot on campus for the Penn State game or for the Michigan State game. Like I'm going to show my hand there. Like I fully expect him to be at one of those games. And from there we'll see. But it's so much fun for me right now to look at the difference in the offensive class and the defensive class right now, the way it has been for the last couple of months. You know, this offensive class is like at most 3 pieces away from being done. And it's been like that for a while. And then this defensive class, it's pretty solid at 2 position groups with linebackers. Like linebackers are done for 24 now that Ohio State got Nigel Glover, the Northwestern transfer, in the transfer portal, which technically gave them 2 in the 23 class. They got 2 in this class. And then cornerbacks. Cornerbacks are for right this moment done. Per some sources. You know, if there's a need to take a 4th one, or if there's someone that catches Ohio State's interest, then so be it. You know, they'll pursue it if they think they need to. But with Aaron Scott Jr., Bryce West, and Miles Lockhart, it's a pretty elite haul for Tim Walton. So there's a vision for this defense, and quite literally, it's on the very front line and the very last line of defense that really needs to figure things out, because that little middle ground there is pretty much done.
And we're pretty much done on the latest episode of the Lettermen Lounge. Matt, take those socks off. Put some flip-flops on. You're going on vacation, pal. Enjoy the beach. Not going to give away quite where you're going. Enjoy the beach, though, Matt. We will miss you for a week, but we'll get by without you. It's okay. The Lettermen Lounge will still be hopping at lettermenrow.com, the message board. Go there right now. Get that. Like and subscribe under the video. We will see you back next week for another edition of the Lettermen Lounge. Thanks for hanging out.